These are 5 players that I cannot stop drafting in fantasy football. Starting at number 5, Jayden Daniels. We all know at this point that running quarterbacks are absolute cheat codes in fantasy football, and Daniels ran for over 1,000 yards his final year at LSU. He's the only FBS player in college football history to throw for 12,000 yards and run for over 3,000. In 2023, Daniels led all passers in deep ball passing grade and deep adjusted completion rate. This offseason, the Commanders brought in Cliff Kingsbury to be their new offensive coordinator, and he's honestly the perfect fit for Daniels. Cliff likes to run a lot of run-pass option and attack downfield. He also has experience with a running quarterback from his time in Arizona when he was with Kyler Murray. Daniels is pretty much this year's Anthony Richardson. He's a steal. He's a value at quarterback that you can get late in fantasy drafts. I know Anthony Richardson only had 2 full healthy games last year, but in those 2 full games, he averaged 25 fantasy points per game. If you like to wait on quarterback in fantasy drafts, Daniels is your guy. Like I said, you can get him in round 9, and he carries top 12 upside at the position because of his rushing ability. It honestly would not surprise me if Daniels outscored Caleb Williams in year 1 in fantasy points per game. At number 4, Derrick Henry. Some backs are just built different, and King Henry is one of them. Henry led the NFL in carries for the 2nd straight year. He finished 2nd in rushing yards last season. He was also 9th in explosive run rate and 11th in yards after contact per attempt. He still posted the 2nd most missed tackles forced per attempt in his career since 2018. Now with Baltimore, his situation is honestly incredible, and it makes it really hard to pass up on his round 3 ADP. He's on a much better offense that will be in scoring position often, and that really matters when you're drafting a running back, especially a back who doesn't catch a lot of passes. And plus, being in a backfield with Lamar Jackson is going to take a lot of attention off Derrick Henry. Derrick has double-digit touchdowns in 6 straight seasons, and even at age 30, I don't see that changing. You can make a strong case for 15 plus rushing touchdowns for Derrick Henry this year. At number 3, Jaylen Warren. Warren was one of the best running backs in the NFL last year, ranking 1st in missed tackles forced per attempt, 2nd in yards after contact per attempt, and 3rd in explosive run rate, along with averaging 5.5 yards per touch, which was 7th in the NFL. And he was tied for 5th among running backs in targets, but he surprisingly saw less than 50% of snaps last year. And so one may think, so what's going to be different from last year to this year? Well, I think Pittsburgh finally has realized that Jaylen Warren is the better running back now that they unleashed him. 2, they didn't pick up Najee's 5th-year option. They have no allegiance to Harris anymore, and no one really cares that Najee was a first-round pick and that Warren was an undrafted free agent. Who's going to help them win football games? Warren is going to help Pittsburgh win a lot more football games than Najee Harris ever will. I also expect Pittsburgh to be more run-heavy under new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, who just gives me the chills every time I say his name because he just burned me so bad last year with Bijan. But hey, we know how much he likes to use the 2nd back on the roster, which was Algier last year. So, you know, technically, since Warren is the RB2, maybe this is the year he goes nuts. All in all, I think Warren is going to see the field a lot more this season, and I expect the breakout. At number 2, Trey McBride. Speaking of breaking out, McBride broke out from week 8 on last year, and among tight ends, he ranked 3rd in targets, 2nd in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards, and was the tight end 3, along with ranking 4th in yards per route run and missed tackles forced. Yes, McBride will have to compete for targets with 4th overall pick wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. But outside of him, that's literally it. I think the targets are going to be very condensed in Arizona this year. Trey will also benefit from a fully healthy Kyler Murray, who I think is going to have a career year. McBride is going as the tight end 3 right now in underdog drafts, and I think he's an absolute steal in round 4. And at number 1, DK Metcalf. Metcalf is coming off a very inconsistent year. Granted, he still did finish as a wide receiver 2, as he was wide receiver 23 in fantasy points per game. 16% of DK's fantasy points did come in week 13 last year against Dallas, where he had 8 catches for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns resulting in 37 fantasy points. That being said, Seattle's offense was an absolute mess last year. Along with their offensive line, they had no protection. Geno had no time to throw the football and was also banged up himself. And so I think this year is going to be drastically different. Seattle has a completely different offense. Run heavy Pete Carroll is gone. They have a new head coach in Mike McDonald who came over from the Ravens, along with a new pass happy offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb, who they brought in from University of Washington. Over Grubb's 2 years in Washington, he ranked first and second in passing yards per game, and was also top 5 in pass attempts both years. Grubb also loved to chuck it deep with Michael Penix, who figures to do the same now with Geno Smith, who has a nice deep ball, and that's going to benefit DK Metcalf and JSN. I wouldn't be surprised at all if DK gets back into 2020 form, where he was the wide receiver 10 in fantasy points per game. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.